Hello, everybody. I see a cartoon Fran. I see a real Fran. And I see a real life Fran next to me. Welcome to the PHLY Draft Show with Fran Duffy. I am Bo Wolf, and we are here to talk about the Combine. Fran, you're back. What a week it was.
What a week it was. Very productive. It was great. It was great to be able to see people in the media that I don't get to see all that often, get to catch up with people around the league that I don't get to see. So it was great. It was a great week.
I mean, you are just all systems go here. You haven't even been home for a full 24 hours, and you're pulling double duty on here today. How are you feeling? How's the body holding up?
I'm tired. I'm feeling it. I tried to get to sleep a little early last night. I had to watch Severance because I missed Severance on Thursday night. Okay. So Julia, we'll talk about that later.
You couldn't just let your innie watch it?
No, they couldn't let the innie watch it. I needed full reintegration there to be able to pull all that in. But so then I watched that, and then I was like, I'm going to go to bed. So that was 10:30. I woke up like 5:30, like too early this morning. But no, it's good. A lot of still so much information to like download. It's such a busy week. You know, obviously there's the athletic testing portion. I prioritized last week the position workout notes, like getting all of that up onto the draft guide. So if you're a diehard, you can go and check all those notes out. Obviously, all the athletic testing numbers are in there, position by position. Our people, everybody at ALLCITY, Jamie here with PHLY, but people all across the network did a great job of picking up the slack there. But then there's like all the interviews I did from the press conferences. I have to transcribe all that stuff and like get all that. There's all the film to watch. I'm doing a mock draft this week. Big board next week. Oh man, we got a lot coming, and I have no idea. I have no idea how to handle it, but day by day.
Maybe those interviews go towards the back of the.
I think so.
The
transcriptions.
Those fill out the database as the months go on.
That's like when I've got 20 minutes. I'll transcribe a couple interviews.
Okay, well, we've got a lot to get to. Yes. We're going to try to keep this moving. This is exciting. This is our first time going live with the sickos in the chat. So this is your opportunity to ask draft questions to the PHLY draft expert, Mr. Fran Duffy himself. Let's start. We're going to do some Combine takeaways, and we both have some players that we want to discuss. This is so hard because there's so many players, right? Yep. And as we talked about last week, there's balancing the not counting it twice, right? Like if a guy's supposed to test really well and tests really well, okay, good, check the box. But it's the things that you didn't expect that you want to go back to the tape on. And so you want to start here with Nebraska defensive tackle Ty Robinson, who is right now your 13th ranked defensive tackle. Ty Robinson from Nebraska. What about his Combine performance is worth discussing?
Yeah, I mean, all of these guys that we're going to talk about, they're almost like avatars for like an entire archetype of player, right? And so Ty Robinson is the example of the player that I was a little bit down on the athleticism. I questioned what the movement skills would look like. Honestly, watched him in person at the Senior Bowl and wasn't that impressed down there in Mobile. I thought he struggled the first 2 days of practice and started to get some wins as the week went on when you got to Thursday. But people that I talked to in Nebraska were like, no, like he's a really good athlete. Watch what he does at the Combine. Watch what he does at the Combine. I said, oh, like we'll see. He went out and he jumped pretty well, had the great 40-yard dash time. And then honestly, what moved me was just watching him move through the position drills as well. And that's something that you and I talked about before the trip. And then when I was out there, one of the things that I love about the Combine is being able, look at the Senior Bowl, you get to still compare those guys side by side with their peers, right? Some of the best players in the country. But at the end of the day, like, all right, they still have like their football helmets on. You still have like, oh, that's the defensive tackle from Nebraska going up against an offensive lineman from North Dakota State, right? When they're out there in their tights, right? Mm-hmm. There's no jersey. It's the same, and it's rapid fire, bang, 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 rapid succession, and you get to just watch all these guys do the same exact movements time and time and time again, over and over and over, and just watching him go through a workout, I thought I was impressed. And so like he is an example of a player where I was down on the athleticism coming in. He proved that he's a better athlete. And so now I think that is going to tweak the grade a little bit for me because I have a better understanding of what that athletic upside ultimately is.
And this is a player who has a bit of a range of like late second to early fourth-ish, maybe late fourth.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of
probably more on the upper side of that now. Okay. Yeah, there was definitely some round two buzz. I want to say in like November, December. Okay. Got invited to the Senior Bowl, like I mentioned, and people were like, "Yeah, like this guy is a round two, round three type of player." I didn't see that in Mobile. I think now that probably comes more to the forefront now.
but you don't want to over.
You don't want to go nuts. But
just
again,
a little bit of
it's also the idea of this is what the buzz was before. So for other people like that, and that's why, like, to me, the combine is all about expectation. Like, my expectations were here, and now, okay, like, that's if my grade now, maybe the athleticism was the only question. If you're telling me he's athletic, on top of everything else I saw or on tape,
right,
that is going to change the lens a little bit.
Are there any other players we're not going to get to who sort of are in this bucket who come to mind? Listen, you're very tired.
I'm racking through. I'm racking through some of the positions here. All right, to a lesser, I would say to a lesser extent, but with bigger names.
Yeah.
Trey Amos, the corner from Ole Miss, and Matthew Golden, the wide receiver from Texas. Both guys were guys that the only question I had was speed, and both guys knocked it out of the park.
Matthew Golden, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, like Golden, I thought was like a mid 4.4 type of guy. Maybe he'll run like 4.48. If he ran 4.44, that would have been a win. I'd be like, oh, that's good. Like, check the box. He goes 4.29. I did not see 4.29 at all. No one I talked to said, like, oh, yeah, 4.29. Impressive. Trey Amos, I was like, if he goes 4.52, like, that might be a win. Like, it's like people still question the speed, but, like, all right, you move on. He goes 4.4 flat. And it's like, that's awesome. That's great. Check the box, move on. I had him in my first round mock draft when I did one in January. It's going to be tough when I do my mock draft tonight, tomorrow, whenever, that Trey Amos won't be in there.
Now, we talked about this on the PHLY Eagles show yesterday for people who didn't see it, but what was the deal? Like, there was different turf this year, and so are you adjusting all of these times like a little bit up or down? Or,
I can't.
You can't, right?
Yeah, I can't. Now, what's weird about it though is that it did feel like I was thinking about it after I got off with you guys. It felt like the big men were the ones that were most affected by it.
Okay.
Because honestly, like we saw,
because the mass that gets into the
potentially, like they, like how much force is being put into the ground.
Yeah.
Because honestly, it was a record for running backs like in the 40 in terms of like the average 40 time, and like I forget what the number is, but it's like X amount of running backs that exceeded 4.5 in the 40. It was the same thing at wide receiver. It was like the most in a decade in terms of how many receivers eclipsed 4.5. Or again, I forget what the exact, but it was basically like a bunch of guys ran fast. At running back, at receiver, you saw it at corner, we saw it at safety. So, some guys had no problems with it, but others did.
Okay. I'm going to go over to mine now, and that is, I believe, one of the guys who was the star of the combine. That was Armand Membou, the Missouri offensive tackle. I mean, just the footage of him running that 40.
Yeah.
I mean, fantastic to watch. That's what the combine's all about, right? But he runs a 4.91, and obviously that's not the reason. But he tests extremely well athletically across the board. He was already your tackle too coming in, but now it does feel like there is some buzz that he may actually be the first offensive lineman off the board.
Yeah, he was a top 12 player for me coming into the week, and yeah, like he's going to be up there for me coming out of it. Really impressive player. He actually, so both Lance Zierlein and Dane Brugler have dropped new mock drafts in the last 48 hours. Both guys had him going to New England at 4 overall, ahead of Will Campbell. So we'll see
is this simply because there's no doubt that he's a tackle, or do you think there are a good case that he's a better player than?
So people will put the film up against it.
Yeah.
People will, obviously the arm length is an issue with Campbell, and that could affect how some teams view him and say like, oh, like he has to be a guard. We'd rather have the pure tackle, but there are some that view Membou as a tackle or as a guard as well.
Yeah.
And so there's some position versatility there as well with them. But I think when you're looking at Membou, really, really impressive player.
Just in terms of like the actual rookie contract scale, I feel like he maybe made as much money as anybody this week.
I mean, that's again, it goes to like the expectations thing.
I mean, you had him as a top 12 player, but even if you go from 10 to 4,
right?
That's
millions of dollars,
tens of millions of dollars.
Yes, 1,000%. It's a good point.
Yeah. Okay, over to you.
For me, my next one, I am going to go with. I'll stay with another Tiger. Let's go with Missouri's Luther Burden. Now, here's the interesting part with Burden, and this is why to me, like, this is one of the big questions for me coming out of this week. Let's rewind. Big time recruit coming out of high school. All right, rewind. Big time recruit coming out of high school, steps on campus, productive, has a great sophomore season. I watched his tape last summer. He was wide receiver 1 for me coming into the year. And I know other people that have gone through felt the same way. Like, this guy is the best receiver in the class, ahead of Tetsuroa McMillan, who also had a huge season last year. But this guy has got all kinds of juice. He's great with the ball in his hands. This season, the production falls off. Was not the Missouri team overall just wasn't as great. And here's the thing for me. You're seeing Todd McShay, he dropped him in his rankings, and he actually kind of hinted at, like, on a recent show of his, it's been great to have Todd McShay back in the space. But he...
Yeah, I mean, he's getting Howie to talk about having sex.
Right. Yeah. Yes, in case you missed that interview, the people
that's true.
I know it's true, but some people may not have seen that. I don't know what you're talking about. But McShay kind of hinted at it. There might be some buyer beware there. Mel Kiper dropped him out of a first-round mock. Wow. Daniel Jeremiah dropped him out of a first-round mock all recently. So there's smoke there.
Yeah, that feels like people are talking. Right. Yeah.
Now, I personally haven't heard anything. I've asked around to some people and they're like, yeah, like, I haven't heard anything. So I don't know. It's what that to me is like one of the big questions for me. Because then I watch them in person. I'm like, okay, like the testing was good. It wasn't like otherworldly, but it was good. And the workout was really good. Didn't put a ball on the ground all night. I thought he had a good workout. And so when I look at Luther Burden, my question is, like, what are some of the things being said behind the scenes that I'm missing at this point in the process?
Yeah, I mean, what do you think it could be? I mean,
that's the thing.
Speculation is not worth it.
Yes, but yeah,
it's also a numbers game of like how many receivers are probably going to go in the first round. Like he's not going to drop out of like the top 5 receivers, right?
I doubt it, right? But
usually, that's a safe number for the first round. But
to me personally, I'm keeping him in my first round mock. I'm going to find it hard pressed to not have him in my mock draft this week.
Okay, I want to use my next spot to gas you up a little bit. Because I feel like if I think of the 2 players from this draft class who you were out in front of, like throughout the fall, even like doing your first mock draft, like I should have, you were higher on them than consensus. One is Gray Zabel.
Okay. Yeah.
And the other is Nick Emmanwori.
Yeah, that guy's a freak.
Like he was your guy. You were gassing him up all fall. And in addition, and that was based off the tape, right? And then he comes into the combine and just absolutely blows it out of the water. 4.38. 43-inch vertical jump, 11.6 broad jump, like one of the just ridiculous performances of the week. He's your safety too. I just want to use that to gas you up. I mean, you know what you're watching.
Well, to me, here's the thing: is that when I watched him, and he was on Bruce Feldman's freak list coming in. I'm pretty sure he was like number 5 on that list for Bruce. So like there were athletic scores out there that said like, okay, like this guy's gonna be a good athlete. But you watch it on tape and you're like, this guy, I mean, he's so gifted. And the plays that he makes his film was really impressive this season. So he was already extremely high on my board. He's a top 20 player for me, top 15 player for me, I believe. Malachi Starks from Georgia is right there with him. Their tags would be touching on the proverbial board. And I think
Starks who had a very weird week, right?
I mean, he's a guy that was the classic, like didn't test great, but
his on-field speed stuff,
weird. Which I'm fine. Like, I'm still good. Dane Brugler actually made a good point recently too, where he said like, if you like Malachi Starks going in, you're sitting there and you're pointing to the GPS. So like that's why I like him, and that's I fall into that bucket.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, like Emmanwori, it's a good case of I'm not going to count it twice. He's not moving up my board because it was already baked in for me.
But you baked in him being this special of an athlete.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, he's amazing. He's outstanding. I mean, so like the comp that I had, I was a little bit conservative, and I had it as Kyle Duggar. Kyle Duggar, when he came out of Lenore Ryan, tested like a maniac. He was out, but he did everything he showed was at Lenore Ryan. It was a D2 school. Yeah. And Emmanwori's doing this in the SEC. Was one of the top defensive players of the year in that conference. So I'm like, all right, well, that's at least a round 1, not a discount, but an uptick there. So yeah, he's gonna be a first round pick. I feel pretty good about that as we sit here today.
No doubt about it.
Yeah,
I think he's got the Fran Duffy stamp of approval. I hope he thanks you when he's drafted.
I don't think that will happen.
I mean, I hope he does. Be a good pop for us
potentially. All right, I'll go to my next SEC player.
And then get your questions in.
Yes, send your question. We'll answer towards the end here. So we got Landon Jackson from Arkansas.
Somebody in the chat already says this is another Fran staple.
Yeah, so he was high for me coming into the week. He was my number 3 edge going into the combine. Again, don't imagine that's going to drop off too much here. I think the film is really good. This is a guy that plays with a lot of urgency. He's strong in the run game. He uses his length well. The production wasn't always there, especially this season, but this is a guy that has some position versatility along the front. He was another like Bruce Feldman's freaks list guy, but a lot of the numbers were like the jumps that he predicted were going to be good, but it was some of the other things where it was like, like what he does in the weight room, like force plate stuff, not anything that gets measured at the combine. And so I was just, okay, like, what are the shuttles going to potentially look like? Because there's questions, especially when you have a longer limbed pass rusher. What is he going to look like turning the corner? I'm gonna be honest. When I watched him go through like the run the hoop drill, which is my favorite drill for the pass rushers, I thought he looked pretty good doing it. This was a guy that I thought had a good workout overall. It was a lot of A's. We talked about my process last week on the show. A lot of A's next to his name. As I went back through the notes, I thought Landon Jackson had a really good workout.
How did it go this year with the? Did you make any adjustments? Right. It was better than ever.
Yeah, I felt very good about it. Didn't miss one rep the entire week.
Didn't miss one rep the entire week.
Not one rep. I got.
That's insane.
It's out in the workspace. My binder's out there. So
I feel like we should take a pause so you can go get the binder.
No, I mean,
the people.
Actually, I tweeted out a video, and I basically said like, all right, once I got all the last workout notes into the draft guide, I like thumbed through it real fast so you could see all the notes and said like, all right, all these notes, they're all in the draft guide and go check it out.
That's good stuff.
There you go.
Very nice. All right, let's have this conversation.
Okay.
That it feels like after the week in Indianapolis, everybody is sort of hinting at and talking around it in different ways. I have up here Tyler Shough, the Louisville quarterback.
Yep.
We're also going to talk about Shedeur Sanders from Colorado. And right or wrong, believe it or not, all the whispers are like, man, Shedeur Sanders might not even be a first-round pick.
Right. That is correct.
And, I heard Tyler Shough might be the second quarterback off the board. Some people say Jackson Dart as well.
Right.
Like, what's going on here?
So I answered a question on the Discord earlier today. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. But become a diehard so you can ask questions directly in the Discord. So this was about Jackson Dart, and it was is there a chance that I've heard that he could vie for QB2? Are you buying the round one hype? And I said, I'm not buying the round one hype. I do think that there could be a chance that he's QB2.
Yeah.
That's my way. And honestly, I went on the DNVR Bronco show yesterday, and Zach Stevens asked me the same thing. He said, Fran, like there's buzz about Jackson Dart sneaking into round one. He's thinking of it of a way of like getting ahead of the Broncos, so that bumps another player down the board, right? They obviously they feel good about Bo Nix, and I said, honestly, I think there's more of a chance of only one quarterback going ahead of the Broncos as opposed to three quarterbacks going ahead of the Broncos.
Yeah.
The thing about the combine, okay, is that everybody's talking.
Yeah.
It can become a bit of an echo chamber, so you want to caution yourself against that. The general feedback has been pretty mixed on Shedeur Sanders and how like interviews have gone. But again, sometimes that's put out there purposely. Sometimes that is truth. Sometimes, you know what I mean? And so it's tough to kind of to weed through it. But there are definitely some people that had conversations with them in the league and it didn't go well.
And again, this is not like I'm not rubber stamping this.
Yeah. Right.
I haven't evaluated the player as well as you have. But we know what football buildings can be like. And there's a lot of, if you're not going to be a head down soldier who follows all kinds of directions, we don't want you. Now, the calculus becomes if you're going to be a self-promoter or sort of the star of the show, you got to be worth it on the field.
Yep.
And the disconnect that you hear is that people just don't think he's that special on tape.
Right. So that's ultimately what it comes down to.
He's not worth what they view as a headache. It bothers me a little bit. It's the complete opposite personality. It reminds me a little bit of the Lamar Jackson conversation from when he came out.
Right.
When it was just like, oh, that guy's just a bump on the log. Like, he can't lead a room.
Right.
And that's why he goes to 32, and then he becomes a 2-time MVP. I don't think that Shedeur is that kind of player, but there can be like an overvaluing of the personality, especially at that position.
There's the another case that I was thinking of this morning. 2 years ago, Aaron Rodgers got traded for essentially 2 first-round picks. The one could become a second, or was it 2 seconds? One could become a first, whatever it was. But he got traded for 2, and it was like, okay, well, we believe that he's 2 years removed from playing MVP quality football. He is worth the potential headache of what he, from a personality standpoint and everything that he brings off the field. Fast forward 48 months, not going to be the case. Like he would, if he were on the trade market, he would not be getting that kind of haul for it. And I just think that, again, it goes to what you said. There's levels to everything. It's a sliding scale. And so when you look at Shedeur Sanders, the first time we did the show, we asked about the quarterbacks, and I said, yeah, like, he doesn't have great traits. He's not even an average athlete. I get why he didn't work out at the combine, not just from an athleticism, but even like throwing, because he would have been throwing with Cam Ward, Tyler Shuck, Jalen Milroe. All these guys like have better arms than Shedeur. So like, I think it would have been noticeable to see like that, that difference there. His game is when he's playing on time, his accuracy, his anticipation, like those are all quality things, but he does not have great traits. And then you take the film. I think he developed bad habits this year because he has faced a ton of pressure over the course of his career, especially over the last 2 years. His navigation of the pocket, his ability to handle pressure and make plays from inside confined spaces is not good, and it got progressively worse as the year went on. And so, so the film is just okay. The traits aren't great. So if the interviews aren't great, like it just makes it's a very tough needle to thread to try and find who are the teams that will be willing to make that call. I want to say, I forget which podcast I was listening to and which insider this was that made this point, but linking the Raiders with Shedeur Sanders.
Okay.
At 6 overall. I was like, because that had become like the popular landing spot in a lot of reputable mock drafts. And so I made the point, I was like, look, because Tom Brady and Shedeur Sanders have a prior relationship.
Okay.
Mark Davis and Shedeur Sanders and Deion Sanders have a prior relationship. Deion said to Antonio Pierce at some event back in like December or January, like, I want you guys to draft him. Like, there's definitely like connection there. But someone made the point about Tom Brady, was like, Tom Brady is not like, because he's the one essentially like saying like he's putting a stamp on quarterback. Tom Brady is not a sentimental like, oh, I want to draft this guy because like I know him. That's not like Tom. That's not Tom Brady's. That's not his MO.
I mean, he chooses football over his family, let alone his friends.
It's a very good point. You know what I mean? So like, that's what it's talking with people. It's where is Shedeur Sanders going to fall? That's one of the big questions coming out of the combine.
Yeah.
And it's not a foregone conclusion that we're not talking like top 10, like for like a first round pick. But look, a year ago at this time, I remember I might even texted you. I was like, I don't know. A lot of the buzz is that Chicago might take Jaden Daniels and not take Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
Like obviously they took Caleb Williams. Every year there are things that come out of it where you're like, oh, like, I don't know. And then those things end up not being true. So it could be possible that things flip the other way.
You could even play conspiracy theorist and think that it's part of something of like Deion's camp trying to get him to a specific spot like that. You could go tinfoil hat on that.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that talk is out there.
Yes, that is absolutely out there. And it's going to be up to honestly, everyone to figure out what you do with that
fall on Shuck versus Jackson Dart.
I think Shuck's film is honestly, like you would say, in terms of like just purely playing the quarterback position, you would say Shuck is the cleanest of the group, of the entire group. Cam Ward is QB1 for me. It was, very, very early on watching the season. But then I think after that, you start getting into, all right, like who's got the second best tape. And I would say like, it's like, Shuck. It'd probably be Shuck. I'm not a big Jackson Dart guy personally.
All right, we appreciate the super chat from Matt Dio, who's giving us a Fran.
Thank you.
I think we can answer a couple of these other questions as well for the sickos who are here. Scott says, hey, Fran, players like Shamar Stewart and Walter Nolan seem to have very wide draft windows. Doesn't this help the Eagles and a player possibly falling to them?
Yeah, and look, I think this is going to be a class where there's a bunch of ways you can look at it, right? And we've talked about the scarcity at the top of like the true blue chip talent. So how that plays out on draft weekend, there are a lot of different things here. Talking with people over the course of the week, it felt like, because I'm trying to gauge like, all right, like what do you think this team will do? What do you think that team will do? So much of it was, I think they'd love to trade down, or I think this team, or I think we would love to trade down. It's like, okay, if everybody wants to trade down, you need somebody to move up. When you have that huge clump of players where it starts at, we'll say 7, and everybody from 7 to 30, there's not a huge difference there. It could be I'll call it like a Nolan Smith type of situation where someone that you have graded very highly on your board starts falling down. A Cooper DeJean, who you graded the same as Quinyon Mitchell, starts falling down, and you're kind of looking around like, all right, we got to make a move up for this guy, or we're going to be able to get this player at our spot. We did not think in a million years. Everyone kind of points and laughs when you hear all 32 teams say that in their post-draft press conferences. But I will say, like, that's often true more often than not, because every team's board is going to look a lot different. So it's going to be, I think it could lead to those kind of, sleeper type selections where you sit at 32. And if you have Walter Nolan really, really high, maybe the other teams don't, and you're able to get a player that you graded highly than the rest of the league.
I think if you're the Eagles, also, like, Shedeur making it to 32 is potentially helpful.
You mentioned the Lamar thing. I mean, that's what happened last time they were in that spot.
That fifth round. That's what a team. That is the specific position where a team would want to get into the first round for that fifth-year option. Another question from King Damey. What do you take of the rumors of off-field issues for Mike Green and James Pierce Jr.? Green has at least spoken on his, while JPJ's sounds a bit more ambiguous.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not a rumor with Mike Green Jr. It is like an official, and I don't want to get into like exact like terminologies there, but yeah, I mean, he spoke about it at the combine because it is a thing. Now he is, from what I understand, like he claimed that all of it was not true and he's innocent. So like that's where like it gets hairy in terms of talking about it. But it's something that teams are going to definitely kind of weed through.
I mean, for you don't have a. You don't have a staff of people who can investigate these things and get to the bottom of these things. How do you weigh these things in your evaluation?
Some people in my role choose not to weigh it. I have to. I just have to weigh it. I just do whatever work I can and talk to people that I trust that have done the work and just say like, okay, like, is there something there or is it not? And I just kind of act accordingly that way. So sometimes, and look, I'm not going to be someone that is going to put all of that stuff out there that you hear, but I'll just have it reflect in the way I grade players. It's the same thing with like James Pierce Jr. Like, you won't go to the draft guide and say, hey, like, there have been analysts in the past that will say like, scouts say this, from a negative standpoint. I won't do that because, honestly, it's like it's hearsay. But if it's from people that I trust, I will incorporate that into the way that I view a player. Yes.
Okay. T. Dutton says, with the Eagles' history of drafting athletes with special tools in their body from smaller schools, specifically Toledo and Houston Christian, this is interesting because this is a relatively recent thing. For a long time they weren't doing this, and I'm not so sure that they will again. However, the question is, were there any small school prospects who stood out at the combine?
Zabel was awesome on Sunday.
Boy.
From North Dakota State, offensive lineman, played tackle, has played guard. A lot of people view him as a center moving into the NFL. A lot of people say he's the top center in this class. So, but he's got guard flexibility. I know that Lance Zierlein had him going 32nd overall in the mock draft he dropped yesterday. The Eagles trading out of that spot. Okay. But I think Zabel goes higher than that. I think that you're probably looking like early to mid 20s would be my guess for Zabel. In terms of other small school players, really quickly, the thing is, I actually had somebody respond to a tweet that I put out about the ranking, because so like on all PHLY, like on social media last week, I posted my top 10s at each position, and people were very up in arms about some of the rankings like on that list.
Good, and that means you're making waves.
Well, I was like, look, people. Here's my take. First of all, to me, the ranking is not as important as like the report. Right, like
of course,
I'd much rather go read the report, and that's how I project the player. But every spring, starting like as soon as the season ended, and honestly, it happens in like October. Oh, what if we redrafted the 2024 draft? Those rankings are going to look a lot different than what they. So like people get so up in arms anytime that a set of rankings doesn't look like the consensus.
The consensus,
it's been a pet peeve.
That's what makes them consensus.
Is that correct? Looking at so when I said that,
what were people most angry about?
Shamar Stewart being low was one. I'm trying to think. There were a few others that people pointed to, like Jaylen Walker, yeah, that was one.
We will get to in a minute.
Yeah, we'll get to that one. Colston Loveland being tight end 3 was one. Yeah, there were a few others, but when I basically responded to that, someone said, "Oh well, you can't be thinking that far outside the box. There's not a lot of small school players in this list." And I was like, well, it was like a record low in FCS players invited to the combine, a record low players, not a record low, but a very low number going to the Senior Bowl. There's not a lot of small school players in this draft because a lot of those guys are transferring up. Yeah. And going back for like extra years and stuff. So you're kind of seeing that play out. to answer your question, in terms of other small school guys, I'm just like buzzing through my notes real quick. I mean, would you count Harold Fannin Jr. from Group of Five?
Probably.
Bowling Green. I thought his position workout was fine. I know that some of the testing scores were a little disappointing, but I thought the position workout was pretty good. That would probably be it for me in terms of the small school guys.
All right, let's talk about Jaylen Walker.
Yes, he was on my list.
You mentioned him. He's on your list. What do you want to pass along about Jaylen Walker, the guy who we're still trying to figure out what he is?
That's exactly it. We talked about it so much leading up, and he didn't do anything to change that. Here's what's interesting, though. A lot of guys didn't test. Right, that was a big theme this week. But a lot of the guys that didn't test were players that participated in the college football playoff, in the elongated college football playoff. Okay. We didn't see a lot of the Ohio State guys, a lot of the Notre Dame guys, Georgia, Texas. A lot of those players did not test. We've talked about Labor Day to President's Day here on the PHLY Eagles show. I wonder if we will reach a point where, look, because I know a lot of people in the college football space are not happy with how late the playoffs went and how late the championship game happened. They didn't like that it happened on a Monday night, like a couple weeks after the thing. So does that get bumped back if college football gets that straightened out, or if they're going to say no, we're going to keep it in this date? Does the NFL change their calendar to try and get more guys to be able to work out? Because the Senior Bowl had it happen too. The Senior Bowl had a bunch of guys drop out because of how long the playoff went.
Why is it now? Is it now because then you've got all the pro day circuits?
That's the other part of it.
Tough. Exactly, or you can move the draft back, but they're not going to do that.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to do that. They tried that.
I think it's very funny that people are complaining that it was on a Monday night. It's so crazy.
That was a lot of college football people are not happy that there's that should be the premier game. Why would you put it on a Monday night? Put it on, that should be a Saturday night, or should be a Sunday night. But they didn't want to go head to head with NFL playoffs. That's essentially what that decision is about. So, but it's more that there's a lot of time that passes from, you think about the first bowl game happens first week of December.
Yeah.
That game happened middle of January. So if you were a player from Oklahoma, you're a big prospect from Oklahoma, you had a 6-week jump, an 8-week jump on preparation for the Senior Bowl, for the Combine, that these guys for the playoff got. And so if the calendar stays that way, and they're talking about playoff expansions, that might add another game or two in there.
I don't see any reason why they couldn't start the playoff sooner.
Yes, I think that's ultimately where they need to get to. They need to get to where it's maybe there's a 1 bye week to give teams that adjust, and then you're getting into the playoff fast.
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so as for Jaylen Walker,
Jaylen Walker didn't do it. I think it's still we're still in that waiting mode of all right, he still hasn't tested. We saw the measurements come in. Now it's just a matter of what does that testing look like? So I think we're in a holding pattern there.
This would not be the case in an actual NFL front office because you have so many people.
Right.
But I do wonder, with a guy like Jaylen Walker, if you're just I don't know what he is. If it comes to ranking him on a board, I'm not going to take him over someone who I have a specific plan for.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it from the macro perspective of the decision-making process, right? Unless there's somebody, whether it's a position coach or a high-ranking person in the front office, standing on the table for this guy is an elite edge rusher, or this guy can be a star in the middle of our defense.
Yeah,
you're probably well, I don't. There's a guessing game here. Whereas I know that I can plug this guy in and he can start on the outside at corner for me day one.
Yeah, and that's honestly it's the
it's risk aversion.
It's just about what is the plan for this player? It's the positionless player thing.
Yeah,
it's not just this guy can do a little bit of everything. We've seen Nick Emmanwori. I know what the plan is for Nick Emmanwori. He can do a bunch of different things. He can match up against tight ends. He can line up in the box. He can play 2 high. He can play 1 high. He can do all of these different things. People have made the comparison to Jeremy Chin because Jeremy Chin tested this way out of Southern Illinois. Mm-hmm. When you watched Jeremy Chin, though, it was I think he can do this. I like him coming down into the box, but I don't know if he can match up with tight ends. That wasn't something that we necessarily saw all the time at Southern Illinois, or playing deep and playing the deep part of the field. That's going to be a big projection. I don't know if he's got. I know he tested that way, but the athleticism on film doesn't always show that kind of player. You probably want to keep him close to the box. Emmanwori, not an issue. When I look at Jaylen Walker, I say, okay, I know he's been asked to do these things in college. but I don't know that he reads things well enough as a stacked player. I don't know that he's big enough, strong enough to hold up at the point of attack as an every down defensive end. I don't know that he's quite athletic enough right off the ball to be a consistent speed threat as a pass rusher. So there's all these questions about all the different roles that he can wear. Like, what is he going to be able to do consistently?
Yeah, and it's the difference between, like, on the outside, you can rank a player or you can do a shadow draft or whatever it is, and then you just get the results of how they turn out. If you're the team drafting them, you got to put in the work and actually develop the player and figure out what the plan is. Like, it is a little bit more difficult, but that also is a reason that teams might miss on a guy because they're lazy is not the right word, but like they don't want to put in that work. It would be much easier to just take a plug and play guy and not have to worry about.
Yeah, that's why you have to be in concert with your coaching staff. Like the coaches have to be completely on board with, like, this is the plan. But that's not the case with everybody. We hear cases all the time where the front office drafted this player because the coaches said they had a plan for him, but then it's not executed.
Davion Taylor comes to mind.
I was thinking Hassan Reddick in Arizona comes to mind too.
All right, let's talk tight ends.
Okay.
Because you've got a tight end on there. I've got a couple tight ends on there. Now, Mason Taylor felt like he was like the star of the broadcast.
Yeah. I thought he was pretty good.
I thought so too.
Yeah. I thought it was a good workout.
Now, you are a little bit lower on him than consensus.
Yep.
It's a very deep class.
Yep.
Will you bump him up a little bit?
Yeah.
I mean, he's a player you've done a lot of work on.
He'll probably get bumped a little bit. Because I thought the athleticism was a little bit better than what I was anticipating. My big thing is that he was still a little bit of a work in progress as a blocker. Like, I think a lot of people think, he's Jason Taylor's son. He's he's got all these like
single drop.
Yeah, and just like from a toughness standpoint, he's going to be really good at the point of that. He's not a great blocker.
Okay.
We talked last week about how that can be a little bit crazy, a little bit wonky with tight ends.
Just show me a willingness.
Yes. He's 6'6", 250, as we see on the screen here. Outstanding graphic from Julia. But when you're looking at Mason Taylor, I felt better about him walking away from the stadium, from Lucas Oil Stadium on Friday. Yeah, I think it was Friday. Whatever day it was when I watched the tight ends. No, it was Saturday.
I'm not going to be any help to you on days of the week either.
No, it was Friday. Yeah, because it was with the safeties. It was after the safeties. Yeah, so Friday.
Thursday.
Definitely not Thursday, because that was front seven.
Sunday.
Yeah. Could have been Sunday.
Okay.
But Mason Taylor, I felt better walking away from the stadium than I did going in.
Okay. Now, what about Texas Tech's Jalen Conyers was interesting to you?
He was a guy that I did not get to Conyers. I actually still haven't done like a full deep dive on him yet. But I didn't watch him at all before the Shrine Bowl. Went down the Shrine Bowl, literally like first 10 minutes of practice. I'm like, who is this kid? He looked different.
That's what you're chasing, man. That's what it's all about.
I was like,
somebody catches your eye, like, ooh,
yeah.
I'm not familiar with your game.
I was smitten from the jump. You can see 6'3", and he's on the bigger side of 6'3" too. I want to say he's just under 6'4", 260. Like, he's a bigger kid, graceful athlete, really just like, I don't want to say automatic at the catch point, but really smooth and natural catching the football. And I thought he had a really good week of practice, a number of really impressive routes, a number of really good catches. So I'm like, okay, like this is a guy that I'm going to be able to watch. It probably won't be till after the combine, but I'm going to earmark this for later. And then I go to the combine, and he tested well, and the workout was awesome. Like, he just crushed every drill. I think he caught every ball. I don't think he put one on the ground. Didn't find out until afterwards. He's an All-City alum. He was a big PHNX their Sunday, because he was at Arizona State before.
Oh,
so he did like a lot of stuff with PHNX.
How about that?
So there was a little All-City love there for Jalen Conyers. But
no wonder you recognized him right away.
Well, to me, like the film or seeing him live twice now, I was really impressed. He looks, and at 260 pounds, like there's inline potential there. I want to get a better sense of him as a blocker. When I get that sense, that's going to determine like where is he in that stack, in that ranking.
Okay. My last one here is, we talked about chasing that feeling, and just you see a little something and you fall for somebody quickly. This is a sort of a stand-in for, are there guys who you watched work out and made you excited to do them, as it were, if you haven't done them yet? For me, this is Joshua Simon, the South Carolina tight end.
Right.
Just watching the broadcast, I'm just watching him move. I'm watching him do the gauntlet drill. I like this guy. Now,
you didn't know all the work. You didn't do all the work.
I didn't know everything. He's going to be 25 this fall.
Yep.
But you have to admit, for a South Carolina tight end, that's actually pretty young.
He's on the younger end of the what was the guy's name?
Hayden Hurst.
Hayden Hurst. Yeah, he's on the younger end of the Hayden Hurst scale. Yeah, I thought he had a good workout. He was another one at the Shrine, and I thought he would, in this tight end class.
You didn't feel the same way I felt.
I thought he had a solid workout.
Yeah,
I did. Yeah, I thought he had a solid workout. This is just it's a tough group to be able to crack. Like, to your point, like in a different year, we're probably talking about him as like a top 6 or 7 tight end.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be tough for him to get even into the top 10 this year, just based off of this class.
Sure, but probably a testament to if you need a tight end in the room, it's good year to need one.
I like that.
Is there anybody else for you who you saw on the field and?
Okay.
We're like, ooh, I gotta watch this guy.
Actually, yeah. Give me 1 second. I'll pull up my list. So I have a thread on X, Twitter, whatever, of the players that stood out most in each positional workout. So position by position. So I'll just go through that real quick. And who are the guys that I had not watched?
I'm impressed. I mean, you didn't miss a rep. You're tweeting out a storm. You're doing these YouTube shorts. I mean, you're all over the place.
It was a long week. All right, so all the D linemen, the D tackles I watched.
And then you get back and you call into the PHLY Eagles show.
I had to. I mean, come on. I got in early and I immediately texted Julia and I was like, I didn't know that Vinny was going to be on the show. Yeah. And I was like, maybe I'll surprise the guys. I'll jump on at the end of the show because I knew I was going to be home early because I was initially supposed to land at 1:30, but those flights from Indy, you get that headwind coming from the west. And you
tell me.
Yeah, you get that coming. So actually, I had a major issue on the flight.
Okay.
So it's an 80-minute flight from Indy to Philly because you get that again, the headwind. 11 o'clock flight. So it's not like early morning. It's not a late night flight. I just got my laptop out after takeoff. I'm setting up. I'm sitting there and I'm going through transcriptions. The guy in front of me.
Oh no.
Jacks his seat all the way back so violently, makes this loud bang on the laptop. No apology, turn, no apology, nothing. And he didn't have headphones in or anything. So look, it was a long week. I went full 2-hand shove.
Did you really?
The lady next to me gave me I went full 2-hand shove.
No.
And then he looked back, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And he just sat the seat up. No acknowledgement, no words,
but
no
then
nothing.
He didn't put it back again.
No.
Wow.
It was bad.
I can't believe you would do that to the Secretary of State.
I can't deny that was the case.
Wow. 2-hand shove.
Oh, it was well deserved.
Wow.
Well deserved.
Wow. The chat is very much in your defense.
It was bad.
That's tough.
Guy I haven't watched.
Listen, this is well-worn territory that anybody who leans their seat back on an airplane should be kicked off the airplane, frankly.
I agree. Shamir Deek from Florida, wide receiver, tested really well. He had a solid week at the Senior Bowl. I haven't gotten to his film yet. He would be one player that comes to mind there. Rock Taylor from Memphis, another wide receiver from the second group.
Great name, obviously.
Yeah, outstanding name. He was a guy I thought had a really good positional workout, so I'm excited to get to his film. Offensive line-wise, Torricelli Simpkins. When I tweeted it out, there were a bunch of people that said future Eagle with Torricelli. It's very Italian first name.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a future Bo Wolf impression coming for him. But those would be some of the names that stand out. Oregon State offensive line, the center Joshua Gray. I thought he had a solid workout as well. So there were a handful of guys.
Okay, good stuff. We look forward to checking it all out on the draft guide.
Yes.
Super chat from Real Time with Prince Blue, who is asking you to give a Zach Berman scouting report.
Oh, I'll let you pick the position.
I would say great natural leverage.
Okay. Yeah. What position are we talking about, though? Where are we going to peg him?
I think he's a defensive tackle.
Okay. All right. So he's a regular. What was the Wake defensive tackle to the Giants?
Not Boo Robinson?
No.
Oh.
Nikita Whitlock.
Yeah, Nikita Whitlock.
Yeah.
Nikita
Whitlock.
Yeah.
Natural leverage for sure. Bulldog mentality. Always giving 110% effort. Great motor.
Scouts rave or coaches rave about him.
Yeah. The lack of length could be an issue at times.
The weight room is he's a try-hard guy, but they do worry about his habits.
Yes, the coaches are constantly getting on him for his sleep habits to make sure that he's ready to go for practice every day. But getting 100% effort for sure,
no doubt about it. Okay, we had somebody in the chat asking about the Rutgers prospects. Do you have any thoughts on the Rutgers prospects in this draft?
A number of defensive players referenced Kyle Monangai. Kevin Monangai?
Former Eagle?
Okay, so wait.
Kevin is the Eagle.
Kevin is the Eagle. So Kyle Monangai.
The new one?
Yeah,
okay.
Kyle is the running back. He's been like a 3 or 4 year starter there. Referenced him as the toughest player that they faced this year. So there's that. Let's see. Tyreen Powell is a big linebacker. Didn't test. But I mean, I actually kind of like his film. I do think that he projects to the NFL. Robert Longerbeam, corner, tested very well. He ran well, jumped well. Thought the workout was solid. He was down at the Shrine Bowl. He looks the part.
Better than Ryan Longbeam, not as good as Ryan Longest Beam.
Correct. I think that's the right way to summarize his scouting report.
Question about the local prospects. This is not Zach.
That's not Zach.
This is Larry's Barbecue who's asking. But I mean, Zach has talked to us about some of these guys, but who of the locals?
I kind of want to let me look at the list of locals, just so I don't forget anybody.
Just text Zach.
I know that's what. Well, didn't he just send us one? Didn't he just send us something with it? Yes, he did. Here we go.
Oh yeah, he did.
All right. Abdul Carter, start at the top. Obviously did not test. My sense, though, is that the injury teams are obviously they got to sort through it, but I don't think that that's going to cause any kind of big drop there. Donovan Ezeraku, by the way, had a listener reach out.
Yeah.
A relative. So he's, I think it was that he worked with Donovan's aunt.
Okay.
And asked her, listened to the show last week, checked with her about the pronunciation. Yes. Said the media guide was wrong, which is not the first time. Crazy that this happens. Donovan Ezeraku. So, which is much easier to say, by the way.
Yeah.
Donovan Ezeraku. Solid field drills, but like it didn't go through the full battery of tests. So we'll wait there. Jahad Campbell was really good. I really enjoyed his position workout. Tested overall fine. I mean, you're talking about like 245-pound linebacker. The thing that's notable there, he stayed afterwards and did so. Like a lot of the linebackers, they'll go through pass rush drills as part of their normal allotment of position drills. He stayed and did all of the D-line drills afterwards, and so and he looked really, really good doing them. That was after the broadcast ended on Thursday night. I remember that was Thursday night. So Jahad Campbell was the last guy on the field. I thought that he had a good workout.
Question from Lambaroo: if they were both on the board, Jahad Campbell or Jaylen Walker, who would you take?
Jahad Campbell.
Yeah,
for sure. I feel really good about him playing. I mean, he still is not like super clean with how he reads things. Like he's still kind of developing there, but I still feel better about him playing off ball as opposed to Walker personally. Fadil Diggs, Syracuse, transfer from Texas A&M. Really explosive straight line athlete. Captain this past year as a senior for Syracuse, transfer from Texas A&M. I think that you see some of the limitations as a pass rusher. It's like it's similar to a Shamar Stewart type of situation where the traits are there. He's like a day 3 version of Shamar Stewart where the traits are all there, but just not a polished or refined rusher whatsoever right now. But he tested pretty well. Miles Frazier from LSU. I forgot that he's a local kid too. I really like Frazier on film. I think he's a starter. Was one of my favorite players to watch on that LSU O-line. I would say probably my second favorite behind Will Campbell. That's not his environment, though, is the combine. Like, seeing him go through things, like he's a step below everybody else from an athleticism standpoint. But again, you don't knock him twice on it because I wasn't expecting him to look all that great. Will Howard from Ohio State. Okay. So during the quarterback wide receiver workouts, I am laser focused on the receivers because I've learned you can't watch everything because then you miss stuff. So
see a lot.
See a little.
See a lot.
So In my previous position, I would just say like, all right, I'll watch the quarterbacks on tape later. I don't have access to all the combine tape now. So I can go back if I wanted to watch like the broadcast. But basically the way I was going to handle it this year was, all right, I'm going to focus on the receivers, just watch the receivers during the workout. And I will then talk to 4, 5, 6, however many opinions I can get of people that are on the field watching the quarterback specifically. And so I did that. Pretty much consensus was Will Howard had the worst workout of all the quarterbacks there. And I could see as I was watching, because as you get to the deeper throws, I have a little bit more time to be able to get my eyes back. All right, who's the quarterback stepping up? And Howard had a bunch of really bad misses. Now, they started bringing fans into the combine a few years back. And obviously it's in the middle of Indianapolis, so it's Big Ten country. And so it's typically like, when Indiana and Purdue players come in, you hear cheering. And then, depending on the player and the night and the week and the year, some guys get more boos than others.
Oh.
Will Howard was getting
really
boos galore every time he stepped up for a rep. Almost like, honestly, personally for me, like inappropriate in my opinion.
Yeah.
I get it. Like it used to be the fans had to be quiet the entire time. It was like the first year or two, and they were all in the upper decks. Then they recently, a few years ago, moved them all into the lower bowl.
Yeah, there's money to be made.
Yeah, and they're told to be quiet during the 40, but then during the drills you can do whatever you want.
Okay.
It's kind of weird, personally. But
are you sure they weren't booing you?
I'm pretty sure, because it only happened when Will Howard stepped up to throw.
Okay. That's very funny.
Yeah, so he was just getting.
I mean, he's gonna get booed in the NFL, but that does
exactly. And
mean,
I'm sure that there are scouts and coaches that are like, oh, like he was getting booed and he was not good. Like, so what does that mean? You know what I mean? But yeah, he did not have a great workout. Kyle McCord did have a pretty good workout. Talking with people that were focused in on him it wasn't one of the 2 or 3 best workouts from the group, but the better than expected was something I got from 2 or 3 different other people that I talked to. And then Elijah Clark from Syracuse. Also, it was a solid workout for him. I thought that he worked with he's a safety. I don't have all the exact notes from him. You can go and check it out in the draft guide. But I thought that Elijah Clark looked solid in the position work.
All right, there you go.
All the local guys.
Scott asks, are there a few players who you feel fit the Eagles' draft and develop mantra? Ooh. A player who may just need a little bit of coaching to be elite. I mean, listen, you're at 32. That's a difficult thing to find. I actually, he's going to go earlier than that, but that sounds like a Shamar Stewart profile, right? A guy who needs to get polished, but has all the Howie Roseman tools in his body. But I think we might be overstating that's a thing that the Eagles chase. Like, I don't really think that they are tools over production to some major degree.
I don't think that's the case early in the draft. I do think when you get to day 3, that is a theme. That's something we've heard Howie Roseman say publicly. I
also think it's position dependent.
Yes, I do agree with that.
I think offensive line for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
You're looking for the outliers, as Jeff Stoutland says. I don't know that that's always the case across the board, but I do think Howie's. You're right. On day 3, Howie Roseman will say, "We are always looking for starters.
Right.
We are chasing upside. With those picks, we are not just trying to draft a special teams player."
When they get to undrafted free agency, that's where you see the TJ Edwards, this guy ran a 4.8, or the Reed Blankenship, this guy didn't test great, and they'll come in and they will prioritize those players. But typically, when they get it to day 3 of the draft, they're taking swings there typically.
Right.
But yeah, I do agree that probably gets overblown a little bit for early in the draft.
I think so. Now, if we think about last year was different because you have Quinyon Mitchell, you have Jalix Hunt, as was referenced earlier. But if we're thinking the championship program guys, the guys to add to this defensive culture, is there anybody who stands out as late first, mid second?
A guy that I gave them in the mock draft I did last week? I think it was the beginning of the beginning of last week, right, Julia? Yeah.
Yes.
That feels like 3 weeks ago. JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State. This is a 3-year starter, 3-year first team All Big Ten, a big part of their championship season this year. Can slide inside, wins with power. He's a guy that kind of fits that. I don't want to say like that Vinny Curry mold, but he's that type of like profile in terms of like long, expansive resume. And like the sack production wasn't always there, but I always felt like he always made an impact on games. So Tuimoloau would be a player that would come to mind there.
You know what? I'm thinking. It feels like the Eagles have not taken a ton of Big Ten guys. Now Cooper DeJean from last year.
I've got you covered there.
But like Ohio State, it hasn't been since like Kurt Coleman, Brian Roll, right?
Hold on. All right. How many
took Trevor Keegan last year?
How many Ohio State players have they taken? So they've taken under Howie Roseman. I've got them as one Ohio State player, and it's Brian Roll. That's it.
What about Kurt Coleman?
That was not technically a
not Howie.
Yeah,
that's 2009, 2010.
That might have been 10. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's a small little thing,
right? In terms of Big Ten,
but I feel like I feel like they're much more SEC heavy.
Yes.
Now Big Ten, last year they took Cooper DeJean and Trevor Keegan. They took Sidney Brown.
All right, so Big
Ten,
I
feel like I'm wrong about the Big Ten thing.
No, but Big Ten is it's actually only 13% of their picks overall of the Big Ten.
Okay, whereas SEC is what?
SEC is 21%. That's a high number. That's the number one. You're looking at me like how do I have that info right now? But
no, I'm not. That doesn't surprise me at all.
21% SEC, 21% Pac-12, which doesn't exist anymore.
21% Pac-12. Yeah, I think
Oregon.
I think if you were to do that, I think if you were to redo that for the last 5 years,
yes,
SEC would jump way up.
I agree. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I know who you are. Not the first time I've met you. It would be hard for you to produce something that would really surprise me, I feel.
You were pretty surprised by the binder, I feel like.
Yeah, that's
true.
And
that's not even that's like tip of the spear. That's like that's nothing.
Pac-12, of course, they have the advantage because not everybody else is staying up that late.
Right. I mean, and that's yeah, we know that.
Oh, somebody's already on that. So my guy says that's because I was staying up late to watch the Pac-12 games. Nicely done. All right. What's the next couple weeks look like for you here? I mean, you just said all those things you got to do. You got a mock draft. You got a big board.
Let's see. Well, you can help me hash this out. Okay.
Let's talk about it.
All right. We got to get notes in. So this morning I tried to get as many of the little anecdotes, stat, not an abnormality, but he was the top 40 time of guys that are 6'3" plus.
Sure. Right.
I got as many of those in that I could into the draft guide. So that's that. I put that to bed. I wanted to get all the athletic testing stuff as just done.
For sure.
Position workout stuff done. I'd like to be able to continue. I have to keep watching players.
Yes.
Okay. So I watched Florida linebacker Shamar James. I did 3 games this morning. Done. So his report for the first time filed, and that's in.
Okay.
So I'm going to try and watch a guy a day. I got to do the mock draft. Try and get that done by end of day tomorrow. I was going to do a 3-rounder, but I think I might have to just keep it at 2. Just for time's sake.
That's pretty good.
We'll see if I can get. Well, maybe I do a 3-round and I don't do full write-ups.
You just do that. Yeah, I think you could do that.
Yeah.
I think you have to. Well, go ahead. Finish.
I got to do the board next week.
Yeah.
Here's the thing.
Is that a write-up or it's just a?
I have to do a write-up with it because my board is going to. It's going to be different in a lot of ways. I have a little bit of a unique way in terms of how I look at it. And you and I have talked about it, but there needs to be a written explanation. I feel I was talking with our ALLCITY colleague Adam Hogue about this in Chicago. As we were just talking about it.
Thanks everybody for watching on Fast. By the way, check out the rest of this episode on allphly.com.
And he kind of reaffirmed it. He was like, "Yeah, I think you need to put that explanation in there when you do the board." So,
but not write-ups on players. Just this is what I'm.
This is how basically how I.
And that's essentially you're valuing the positions.
Yes. Yeah. And basically it's attached to how much players at that position make in the NFL and what that means. So I'll go through all that. Then this time of year is typically spent. It's not just watching new players, but then also making the rounds back on players that I want to wrap up. So all the top corners, I want to watch all of the times they were targeted this year because I've probably done 2 or 3 or 4 games, depending on the player, 4 games from this year. But the way that I kind of just put a bow on every evaluation for the top guys is, all right, I'm going to take all the top corners and I'm going to take an afternoon. I'm just going to watch all the times they were targeted this year. Maybe just from the Power 5 competition, they're their best competition. So I got to do those. We're doing shows every week. We're doing
free agency next week. Yeah. And the transcriptions you talked about.
The transcriptions. Yep. The transcriptions. That one is the easy one because that one I think I just like, hey, I've got 15 minutes or I'm going to.
That's got to be the bottom of the pile.
Yeah. That's hey.
You got to prioritize watching the new guys.
Yeah.
I feel like early for the next week or so.
Right. I got to watch as many of those guys as I can.
You got to do Joshua Simon.
The 25-year-old tight end. Bo was asking me to watch the 25-year-old tight end from South Carolina.
No, I'm asking you to do him.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I think that's probably the order, right?
Yeah.
Then there'll be at some point next month there'll be a 7-round mock. We'll do that. I've done those in the past for my own personal enjoyment. That takes about a day and a half, maybe 2 days.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot, but it'll be fun. It's a fun exercise for what I like to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're deranged. That's good.
Right.
That's why we love you. Listen, I think that sounds fun.
Yeah, it is fun. It is fun.
Okay. All right. That'll do it for this episode of the PHLY Draft Show with Fran Duffy. We will be back next week, once again, live at noon on Tuesday. That'll be right in the middle of free agency tampering period, so we'll have some other stuff to talk about. But let us know in the comments what you think. If there's anything you want us to address on next week's episode, we'll have a little rubric for it. And that's all we got. So, on behalf of Fran and Julia, we thank you for watching. We will talk to you next week.
We all silly like the mayor.